Welcome to On Trauma and Power. I'm your host, Jenn Turner, co-founder and director of the Center for Trauma and Embodiment. I'm so glad you're here with us. Each episode, I sit down with powerful leaders, educators, and survivors from around the world. Join me for these empowering conversations rooted in whole person, embodied experiences where trauma meets power and healing takes shape. Let's dive in. Hello and welcome. Thank you so much for being here with me, Linda.
It's such an absolute pleasure. And like, I was raised in Australia, I am full of piss and vinegar. And I just need to let people know that at the start, like, I am a fart in a tea kettle today. And I've been this way for the last few weeks. And I know that this is different to how I normally turn up on podcasts. And hey, we're here.
I love it. You're welcome with all of that energy. It really sparks for me as well. So I'm so glad you're bringing that and sharing that with us. So Linda Tai, LMSW, also an ERYT 200, is a somatic therapist and integrative trauma therapist who deeply understands the wounds of war, refugitude, and immigration. The rising stranglehold of authoritarianism lives as body echoes alongside ancestral reverberations of military occupation and colonialism. Regarded as a trauma expert who speaks internationally and hosts workshops and trainings for therapists, Linda is passionate about breaking the cycle of historical and intergenerational trauma at the individual and community levels. Thank you for being here, Linda.
I feel that from you, Jen. Thank you. Thank you. Yes. So, a practice to start with, and maybe my nervous system will shift in the process of this practice. So.
Let's experiment, right? Let's experiment.
Yes. So I've noticed lately that, and this started, well into last year, and there was something that was like heightened for me as someone who was a child refugee into Australia and an adult immigrant into the US, and I live here, and I am a non-citizen. Yeah, and so the things have been shifting for me in my nervous system in terms of self-protective armoring. And yet, January we saw George Floyd's murder. God, I just did a PTSD flashback in time. We had Minneapolis happening with the immigration raids there that were very much in the news and in social media. And then the Epstein files, and now the weekend just passed with more invasion of other people's sovereignty to self-determine their own future, but to not negate the terrible things that have been happening in Iran, right? But it's all like, like up here. And my head has been coming forward, right, and pulling back. It's the turtleneck. Right? It's the turtleneck of I need to be in the world and peer out, but I really want to pull my head back in. Yeah. And so if you like, I invite you to actually intentionally inhabit this little turtleneck and to bring your shoulders up and let your little turtleneck be nice and small and close to the edge of your turtle shell. And then squeeze, 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 squeeze. And then easy does it. Lengthening, taking up space, nice and slowly. Nice and slowly. So the expansion naturally follows the contraction rather than forcing the expansion to happen. And then we just pause here. I'm noticing for you, Jen, there's a rocking that emerged. There's some colour that's returning to your face. I get the sense that your navel has come forward and down, similar to mine. Yes, and now naturally your neck and your head is starting to move around, some natural orienting beginning to emerge. Our periphery is expanding. That that practice is one of the practices that has really helped me lately, is to actually complete the shock trauma response. Yeah, because the shock trauma response is, it's all here, it's at the occipital crest. Right? And if that crick in the neck, if we hold that tension for long enough, what happens is it takes out the blood flow to the brain. Yeah, and
Yep.
then we are knocked out. So that is our survival architecture, and yet we're like, no, but it's not like I don't need to be knocked out. So then we have another set of muscles that says, keep looking, got to keep looking. Yeah, and then we create that tension there. And so if we can intentionally inhabit that turtleneck,
And we can
and
actually
then
change
release.
that. Yeah.
Yes.
Mm.
Yeah. Right. Because, yeah. Mm-hmm. From here, let your chin come forward and back. Yeah. And find that place where your head sits nicely on your neck and on your shoulders. And yes, you can turn your head from side to side, and yet there's this nice lengthening, yeah, that is stabilized through the diaphragm, through the solar plexus. And then from here, you can do this in your chair or you can do this standing up. Imagine your head, neck, shoulders, and torso as one unit. Yeah. And hinging forward at the hip crease, at the hip thigh crease, and coming back up. And this will actually cause your deep core muscles, as well as your solar plexus, to come online. And then if you like, you can try out at, say, a 45-degree angle, and to allow your arms to dangle forward. Yeah, so that you're letting the tractioning of the weight of your arms release any tension that may be there in the neck and in the shoulders. And perhaps some figure eights with the arms, which is actually quite a lot of fun if you're standing up. So you can choose to stay seated or you can stand up. Yeah, and let the arms sway from side to side as you experiment with your head, neck, shoulders, torso being one unit. And so the diaphragm, the thoracic diaphragm, is more than a breathing muscle. It's also a core stabilizer. And that is the first part of the body that blows out, or that loses its structural integrity when we are in a state of horror, yeah, and a state of acute shock. Yeah. And then from here, if you're standing, you can try busting out a half moon with this through the core that is now online. Yeah. And this here, this is the container for our grief and for our rage. And so when this is here, I'm able to titrate, some grief and rage moving through. I'm also able to pendulate between activation and resource. And this right here, those two exercises, like the turtleneck and then the neck, shoulders, torso, head, one unit, like that is how I have gotten through the last couple of months. And to the point where I now walk up, and I pick up things and I notice how easy it is for there to be a crick in the back of my neck when I go to reach for something, right? Because I lead with my face, I lead with my nose, I lead with my mouth. And it's like, no, just I keep this as a unit and then reach, so that now the reach comes from the core.
Thank you so much. And I even that planting that seed for me around how much I'm kind of leading with that, with my chin and my neck, rather than this kind of full embodied kind of channel here. It's like, oh, that's such a different experience. Even to lean forward to the microphone, right? Like,
Yes. And I love it because as you lean forward to the microphone with your head, with everything as one unit, you're still with yourself as you're with me.
That's right.
Yeah.
And so this is less with myself and more reaching for you.
Yes,
or
yes.
responding to you.
That's the truncated attachment cry.
Wow.
Like, "Oh," right? Yeah, and that naturally emerges when there's acute shock and horror.
Mm,
Yeah. Is we get where the crick in the neck is the truncated attachment cry, but then that is underpinned by terror. Yeah, every time if a child actually reaches out, is in a place of I really need help right now,
mm,
there's terror that's underneath that.
mm.
Yeah, and so that's part of the shock trauma and the horror. Yeah, and then we lose that girdle through the center.
I love that you named terror because I think that gets lost a lot in the attachment conversation.
Mhm.
That is what is beneath it. It is not, it becomes an intellectualized and heady kind of thing, like attachment
Mhm.
style and how you're responding to, and it's like, what is in there is terror.
Yes. And therefore, those attachment styles are actually an adaptation for a child that was put into an impossible situation.
Yeah.
And that attachment style adaptation is then in service of helping them to not feel the feeling that they do anything to not feel ever again.
Mm.
And mm, mm,
Yep.
and that's terror. Inconsolable terror.
That's right. Practices, I think you kind of got us there, but I wonder if
Mhm.
there's more to say just
Yeah.
or on your mind about it.
Like if I slow it down for us all, I'm a former child refugee, and so I understand the trauma of war from the perspective of civilians.
Mm.
And war trauma is the overexposure to death and to violence, and it's the overexposure to senseless death and senseless violence. And Minneapolis is a militarized zone. And
Mhm.
so therefore, people are experiencing war trauma, and war trauma is a combination of shock trauma, acute shock trauma, and horror at the overexposure to senseless violence and
Yeah.
death.
Yes.
And that's what I was seeing in people's bodies. Like I was reaching out to therapists in the Twin Cities area to do just to offer emotional support and emotional support groups. And I'm looking through the space, and I'm seeing the whites of people's eyes, right? Just the little bits of horror that are moving through, and then the bracing, and
Mm.
then the head forward, right? And like that's where completing the turtleneck can be really helpful, and then helping to reinstate a sense of center so that we can continue to turn up in such a way that's more solid.
Mm. That's a beautiful component of the work too, to show up for those that are holding the space, right? That
Mm, yeah.
um,
Hmm.
can be forgotten sometimes when there's crisis
Yes. Yes.
and when there's trauma, active trauma happening.
Hmm. Yeah. Not that there's anything wrong with letting yourself collapse or letting yourself be held or letting yourself
Love
be
that.
supported. And it's that both and, right? If I can help you at the somatic level, then you're going to have more containment for yourself as well as for your clients. And that containment is what then actually gives rise to coherence in terms of what we're feeling, why we're feeling it, and then sense making.
You talk about coherent rage, and I wonder if we could kind of move toward that, if you might share more about kind of how you understand that or what that
Mhm.
means to you.
Yes. Um, in the attachment world, we often talk about coherence in terms of that being something that emerges in terms of one's sense of self as a result of having had a supportive, witnessing, attuned other. Yeah. Where all parts of us are welcome. Yeah, and as all parts of me are welcome, as my needs are attuned to, and as my needs are then scaffolded in terms of my developmental needs over the course of my childhood, I then develop a coherent sense of self. So how I see myself matches how other people see me, and how other people see me matches how I see myself. And I can turn up in the world as I am, knowing that there are loving limits placed upon certain behaviors. Yeah. And that coherence also happens in reciprocity, meaning that our parents also role model and elicit from us what they feel are coherent expressions of various emotions. And so a child who doesn't get coherent experiences of healthy aggression, healthy assertion, being protected, then that child can move through the world not knowing what to do with their anger. And so we can pendulate back and forth between impotent rage and righteous rage, despairing rage and helpless rage and inconsolable rage, right? Which is actually the inconsolable attachment cry, right? Because underneath every fight part is a vulnerable young attached part. Yeah. And there is dignity involved in having your developmentally natural upsets be recognized, to be attuned to. Yeah. There is dignity in your oopsies and ouchies and injustices be validated. And so that 2-year-old period is when that protest, right? That's the protest. Yeah. Anger is really honest. Anger is so truthful. Anger says, this is fucked up. I don't like this.
Yeah.
Yeah. And we also go through a period in our development in our teenage years where there's a lot of that protest energy. And we need loving limits. We need role models that offer coherence around what we're feeling and then offer us a way in which to channel that energy because it is creative energy.
Yes.
Yeah. Like when I don't like how something is, I want it to be different. Right, that could turn into a binary. However, that can also be transmuted into creative energy, life force energy, the energy of change. That if we can channel it, then it becomes sustainable. It becomes life force.
That's amazing. And so true when I think in particular about adolescence, mostly because I have 2 kids in that space right now and how much creative force, how awake they are to the way that the world works and the ways that it is folding in on itself or full of hypocrisy or setting them up to fail.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm thinking a lot about how, when we're talking about coherent rage or even being in a position where rage is held, so much of that is based around identity too, and who is allowed to, or the space is given to be angry about something, voice something, have a different idea of how something should be.
Yes, and then that adds a texture, right? A texture in terms of like there's sacred outrage, right? Now we're getting into the dynamics of oppression, right? Where my sacred outrage, there is an element of righteousness to it. However, in my righteousness, am I engaging in power over dynamics, right? Because I feel so right about this rage, yeah.
Yeah.
And so that's that the invitation, the opportunity for discernment oftentimes only arises after we have been given the place and the space for our sacred outrage to be expressed and to be witnessed. And as you said so clearly, Jen, like certain bodies are not allowed to be angry.
Right.
Yeah. And the bodies of the oppressed have never been allowed to be angry because that gets us institutionalized or medicated or pathologized or unalived.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the cost is incredibly high.
Absolutely.
So some of what I guess the invitation could be, if if we have to bury it or shove it into the eaves of our awareness because of being in a body or an identity that does, where rage is not, there's not space for rage or dissent.
Yeah.
Well, one of the things I think too that you and I have spoken about that I think is so powerful is when we look at how in the therapeutic world, the wellness world, like either pathologized or not as healthy, not, and then it becomes this good bad binary piece. And I wonder, if we can talk a little bit about that too.
You know that feelings wheel where there's like 3 layers of feeling, in the middle there's mad, sad, bad, and glad, and then you get the next layer out, and then the next layer out. And when I worked in addiction recovery, I remember throwing out that addictions wheel for us to have a look at, and most people could, they connected to the primary emotions, right? Mad, sad, bad, and glad. And the path unfolds, and it's a recognition of my parents weren't able to hold space for my emotions beyond mad, sad, bad, and glad. That's why I got stuck there. Yeah. And then I find a solution to all my problems, which is through the addictions and compulsive behaviors. Yeah. That then also developmentally keeps me at that age. And over time as a therapist, I put out that feelings wheel with other clients and asked, what is your relationship to these feelings? What were you taught in regards to these feelings? And I found it so absolutely fascinating where my clients who are raised within more religious fundamentalist homes were taught that certain emotions are good and other emotions are bad. Yeah. That if I'm anxious, it means I don't believe in God enough. Right? Like I don't trust God enough. And to me, I wasn't raised within a Christian theology, and so it was really fascinating for me to actually learn about the ways in which religion also indoctrinates us into the perception that certain feelings are good and bad based upon a morality. Therefore, if you have these feelings, you're not a believer. And yeah. And then that seeps its way into the macrosphere here in the United States. And as an immigrant into the United States, I have a slightly different perspective than someone who was raised within this petri dish. In Australia, we have a term called the fuckets. I'm having the fuckets, right? And we are totally okay with being a bit pissy, a bit irritable, a bit, like it's fine. And at the same time, we also don't feel the need to smile all the time and be happy all the time. And people who are doing their jobs in customer service jobs don't need to have the smile and the how are you and did you find everything and blah, blah, blah. Like they're doing their job. They're scanning your groceries. Like, there isn't that thing as well. And so the good, bad thing in terms of emotions also expresses itself socioculturally in ways that are normalized for people who live here.
Fascinating.
Yes. And so then we get back to the human development dynamics of the need for belonging and affiliation and identity and purpose and meaning. And how within cult environments, right, which the United States, like you can talk about patriarchy and white supremacy and capitalism, like they're all cult. Right. Like, and we've become so indoctrinated in terms of this is how we operate in this world, right? In this world here, that we don't see it as high demand, coercive, needing to be in the in group. Otherwise you're in the out group. And then over time, the out group becomes the new in group, right? It just keeps recycling itself. And within those dynamics, compliance in order to survive in order to have some proximity to affiliation, belonging, identity, meaning, purpose.
Mm.
Yeah. The compliance in order to not be a target,
Yes.
right? The needing to participate in your own humiliation in order to survive.
Mm. Fuck, that's powerful.
Yeah, it becomes so heightened. And so then we weaponize calm. Calm then becomes gentrified. It then becomes spiritualized. Right? We talk about spiritual materialism and spiritual narcissism and spiritual authoritarianism, spiritual materialism, and yet we also see that in the psychedelic world with psychedelic authoritarianism and psychedelic bypass, just like there's spiritual bypass, psychedelic authoritarianism, right? And it's that case of wherever you go, there you are.
Isn't that the truth? Yes. Yes.
Yeah, and so we keep replicating the same dynamics.
Can you concretize in some way around the ways that calm and being obedient and compliant is weaponized?
Look, if we talk about it in terms of the dynamics of race, right? Little white kids, right? Lots of energy running around, being mischievous. Oh yeah, that's normal childhood development, right? Kids are supposed to be curious, and kids who are loved, right? They're mischievous. They get into trouble. They want to explore the world. Yeah. But when a child of color is having a moment or a series of moments, yeah, then that becomes a parenting issue. Yeah, that becomes like ADHD medication. That becomes putting them in a different class than separating them from all their classmates. Yeah. It then becomes part of the school to prison pipeline for children of color. Yeah. Yeah. And this is like separate to the conversation around rage, but if we add the dynamics of when your needs are unmet and you get upset, there's only a certain degree of upset that a body of color is allowed to express or inhabit, and then I need to use my words in order to maybe get my needs heard or met. Right, so I have to then self-snuff my anger. I have to self-snuff my needs. I have to self-snuff the charge that's underneath, and then I have to teach my kids how to do that.
Be extra calm, be extra
be extra
logical
nice.
or
Yes. Yes.
Yep.
Yes. It makes me think about a story that Dr. Kenneth Hardy actually talks about at his teaching lab. He's an African-American psychologist, has a teaching lab at a university, one-way mirror. And, you get white kids in there with their parents, and the kids are running around and picking up things and going, I know there's a microphone in here. And they go running up to the mirror, and the one-way mirror, they can't see you, but they're like banging on it going, I know that you're behind there. And all the researchers laugh. And then, people of color come in, children of color, and the child wants to explore the space. And the parent's like, no, like sit down, be still. Someone will tell us what to do. Yeah. And in Ken Hardy's book, he talks about how, his white psychologist colleagues would come up to him and say, you need to psychoeducate your clients, your people of color, that it's natural for children to explore the world. And in that moment, there was so much fury in him because these people really didn't get it. They didn't get that these parents are trying to help their children survive.
That's right.
Yeah. And so that right there, like that fury that he felt that couldn't find words for, like that happens like so many times throughout the day. And I mean, it becomes taxing, metabolically taxing on the nervous system to try and navigate all of that charge so much. And I know that so many folks are doing this now with the Epstein files.
Yeah.
I have been loving that many of us, and it's mostly white women, right? And I get it, and we also need you, are fucking furious
Yep.
Yeah. And, there's information and then there's confirmation. Yeah. And for so, like, you can apply those metrics across all social issues. For some of us, we are furious because what is happening is confirmation of something that we know, whereas someone else will just relate to this as information. Yeah.
Or as an outlier.
Yeah. Yes. And you just want to punch them in the face.
Absolutely. The amount of times that people are like, well, Jen, you would think that because you work in the trauma field, so you just think everyone has trauma. I'm like, no, I'm actually awake, somewhat awake to what's happening and what exists.
Yeah. Yes. Like, I haven't read the Epstein files, but my Instagram algorithm has changed. Right. And people are sharing things, and I'm like, oh yeah, this is everything that I've seen in practice for the last, 10 years.
That's right.
Yeah. And now it's actually coming into the public sphere. Yeah. It's confirmation. It's not information. Oh,
We have to wait to see this to have
yeah.
confirmation of what we already knew. And then when will we forget it? That for me is what is so painful. It's like the collective forgetting that Judith Herman talks about and writes about.
Yes.
Like the waking up, and then how do we bury this because we can't possibly as a collective seem to bear. It's like part of the healing that would have to happen would also be welcoming perpetrators into healing and understanding that they're also suffering. That's something certainly I've struggled with in my career.
Yes. And I think, as clinicians, we're trained to engage with clinical nuance. And so I always check in with myself that if I'm unable to hold clinical nuance around this, then there might be my own personal trauma history that's involved here in some way. Yeah.
Yep.
And then you go and do that work, right? You go and do that work. Yeah. Like the whole Minneapolis stuff, it actually, and the immigration stuff over the last year, it's actually brought up my own personal history of being hunted. Yeah. And right, 3 weekends ago, went and did that work for myself. And it is so important that we do that. And that then allows us to engage with the nuance and the complexity.
I love what you also kind of just said around like when we can't hold the clinical nuance, or when it's hard to even grasp it, that's an invitation for us to do another round of or layer of our work. But to me, that's also what you said earlier, which I thought was so important around how, there's nothing wrong with collapse. I think sometimes, right, it's like we collapse because that's too much, because we're overwhelmed, because we're activated. And that's really powerful information for us.
That is such powerful information.
Right? We have we have rage that might be really despairing. And that is also really, really important information.
Yes. And that's the texture, right? That's the, like, that is actually moving towards that activation with some capacity for mindfulness and some capacity for pulling apart the texture of this rage in this moment, and how different is it to my rage in regards to other things. Because I promise you, I spent 15 years of my life being all out fucking furious, right? Could not speak a single sentence without a cuss word in it. And then, then things shifted. And I've noticed that in recent times, like, I'm back to every sentence having a cuss word in it. And I'm laughing now because that is now also my way of discharging some of this nervous system activation.
Yes.
Yeah. And yet there was collapse for me after the murder of Alex Preddy, right? There was some collapse, and and then I'm using my somatic skills to create containment and coherence, which then gives rise to discernment. And then I'm able to, like, I notice when I'm not here, right? And then some of the grief and collapse moves through, and then I can bring myself back, right? So now I'm titrating it. Yeah. And that titration allows for me, with each repetition, to go in there and feel the texture of things. And after I did my work around my history of being hunted, which you can read about on my website in the newsletter archive, right, the end of February newsletter, I noticed for me there was a return of healthy aggression and healthy assertion. Because now I look at the news or I watch things and it doesn't ping the terror that I didn't even, my history of being hunted, I didn't even know that was there until all of these things in our country, right? Until those things started happening. Yeah. And as a trauma therapist, it's like, well, I'm going to do something about that. I'm going to go do something about that. And yet, yes, collapse is information and what you choose to do with that information. Yeah. That's the open-ended invitation to continue to create resources for yourself over time so that you can incorporate sustainability and longevity and collective capacity in your life. In your life. Because none of this shit is going away.
Right.
Yeah.
I love how open you are about your kind of coming to this work and your history and experiences. I'd love to hear just a bit more about how you found your way to being a practitioner, because I think there can still be such a heavy stigma around that, you know? Almost so all of my colleagues, myself, I come to this work because I have a history.
Mm-hmm.
And yet it continues to be that lived experience is put second, third to data or studies. And so I think the more we can give voice to it, there's an impact.
Yeah. It's actually really neat. As you said all of that, I could feel a belch starting to emerge in me, which is a good thing. That's like my nervous system is releasing and relaxing. Yeah, so if a belch comes out in my response, please forgive me. And
it's all welcome here, Linda.
Yeah, and when we talk about decolonizing our practices, how much of that do we extend towards ourselves? How can we center ourselves in the decolonization so that we can decenter ourselves even further? Yeah, right. It's that paradox, and for me, a paradox is a dynamic polarity. Right? There's richness, there's juiciness, there's aliveness there when there's dynamism in the polarity. And yet if we don't attend to it, it becomes polarization. And where there's polarization, it's an indication of trauma. Yeah. Yeah. And that very necessary compartmentalization that many of us have learned how to do in childhood is what makes us so good when we turn up into our clinical spaces. And yet there comes a point for all of us as clinicians where that compartmentalization just isn't working anymore. And can we bring some more coherence to who we are and how we turn up through, through doing our own work?
And being transparent about that, or allowing that to be in the space.
Yes. 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 Right. And there's always that clinical piece there about with this client, I can allow this to be in this space. And with this client, right. There's still always that responsibility. Yeah. But responsibility is very different to the bifurcations that we have been taught in graduate school about who we are at work and then who we are outside of work. Yeah. Yeah.
Different clients are going to interact with our presence and our history and our complexity in different ways. But if we're building genuine, authentic trust and practicing being in a relationship with another human, if we're just putting on our kind of professional gloss, how is that possible?
And like I do have clients where they know nothing about me and my identities and my history, and that's okay. And there are other clients for whom that's a real game changer. Sitting with a veteran, and he chose to see me because I'm not in network with the VA, right? He wanted to see me because I'm a civilian, but he knew from the first few sessions that I understood war. And that helped him to feel safe with me because I understood war and I didn't understand it from his institutional, like his own lived experience. Yeah, and I'd done enough of my own work that I could help him name moral injury, systemic betrayal, right, in ways in which the military were absolutely not going to help him name.
Yeah.
That allows the fullness of who you are to be present in such a way that it's in service of your client. And one of the things I think about is sharing from the scar and not the wound. And yet, we're in a parallel process with so many of our clients.
What about when you have that wound reopened or a fresh one?
Yes. Yes, I openly acknowledge it and I say, I don't know if this is something that I could be helpful with you at the moment because this is so alive for me right now.
Yeah.
Yeah. And for some clients, they're like, tell me about how you're working with this, or tell me about what you're, right? And I can actually see that there's a relationality that's here, that exists in mutuality, that really I'm not free until you are free. And we are grokking that in our relationship that they will then take into their relationships, right? That what we're role modeling right now as a parallel process, like they will take this with them into their other conversations, in their other relationships, in their lives. Yeah. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so it's welcoming all of the above. And I often say to folks very openly that that for me, being a therapist is a byproduct of my own healing journey. There is so much that I love about what I've learned about trauma and attachment trauma. And yet for me, my symptoms did not match my history. I went looking into my history for perhaps more history that would help make sense of my symptoms as a young adult. And I found out some more awesome things, awesome, air quotes, like awesome things that I had shoved off right into into the recesses of the echoes of not knowing. And yet when I came across the work of Dr. Kenneth Hardy, of Dr. Reza Menikam, that really, and Dr. Joy DeGruy, really helped me to make sense of racialized trauma, the trauma of repeated soul assaults to me and to people who look like me.
Yeah.
And needing to participate in my own humiliation in order to maybe survive. To see how my parents had to do that to a larger degree than what I need to, and yet a part of me still is very young and small.
Yes.
Yeah.
I'm so grateful that your healing has brought you here to share all of this. And I wonder too, if you might share a bit about how like the somatic thread was pulled through for you and what that was like in terms of either your own process or how that you found your way to that as a practitioner.
Yeah, before I became a mental health clinician, I was a yoga instructor and a meditation instructor. And running parallel to that, as well as before that, I'd come to Alaska to hide out from the world. I was like done with modernity. I was done with the model minority myth. Like I was fucking done, and I was going to do something about it. Like there are people who talk about it, and then there are the people who do it. And I had enough juice. I had enough rage. I had enough whatever, like all the ways in which my parents weren't able to turn up for me. There was something they did right because I was just going to live my life. And that led me to Alaska. That led me to a reconnection with the land. That led me to re-inhabiting my body, because how you dress when it is 0 Fahrenheit versus when it's 20 below Fahrenheit versus when it's 40 below or 55 below Fahrenheit is vastly different. And it is a life or death situation. Right? And push, pull, lift, carry from the world of occupational therapy. And we also know from the world of trauma-informed weightlifting, right, the connection to the deep core muscles, getting them online, helps to build emotional resilience. I was able to practice the tenets of positive youth development and experiential education in practice. And that helped to build my sense of competence and confidence in things unrelated to my trauma history that I didn't even know that I had. Wow. Yeah. Build a sense of efficacy in the world, build a sense of I can. And I got to practice these distress tolerance skills through being uncomfortable in doing things that I wanted to do. I built a log cabin with my partner. A couple of years later, we built a stick frame cabin down a trail in the woods, so we had to schlep the entire cabin piece by piece down a trail. Yeah, a couple of years after that, we built another log cabin. Yeah, I'm running chainsaws. I'm running chainsaws with rotary blades on the ends of them. I'm running like all manner of power tools, and I'm measuring in feet and inches, which for me, growing up with metric, is like mind-boggling. And so I get to stretch myself and I get to learn how I learn. And when you learn how you learn, you can learn how to do anything. Yeah. And that led me into meditation and yoga, which actually then allowed me to see that how you do one thing is how you do everything. And if you can change the way in which you do one thing, you may change the ways in which you do other things. And through those embodied practices, I was able to grow some new brain cells and neuronal pathways between the left and the right and the front and the back and the top and the bottom of my brain. I was able to engage in metacognition and expansive awareness. I got to develop an observing self. And from there was when I got into becoming a trauma therapist. And I knew I wanted to be a trauma therapist before I started graduate school. And so I enrolled in all the trauma trainings parallel to graduate school. And I used those spaces to do my own work because living in Alaska, I couldn't access therapists who were trained in those modalities. And I didn't have insurance then anyway. And so it's a case of you make do with what you've got and what you have access to. And so much of my recovery was borrowing books from the public library, watching YouTube videos. This was before podcasts. And I got to just be let be. I got to be left alone. I got to re-engage with my agentic capacity. And by the time I got into these trauma trainings where we were asked to do our own work, I had some competence at something else to leverage off of, and I had developed the capacity to be uncomfortable through yoga and through other things that I'd done, and I could discern between am I uncomfortable or am I unsafe. I could discern between am I being inconvenienced or am I unsafe. Yeah. Is this uncertainty or is it unsafety? Yeah. And I could sit with the not knowing, being uncomfortable, and not having to have things my way right now, and it not be life or death. And it's the grokking with those on a daily basis through the discipline of what it takes to live mostly off-grid in remote Alaska that for me, was life-changing. It was absolutely life-changing.
Thank you so much for sharing all of this with us.
People often ask me, like, what's the secret to trauma healing? Right? Like as if I'm some expert. And I look back at my own life and I look at the lives of clients as well as folks who are mostly on the other side. And the game changer is affordable, consistent, predictable, safe housing. Yeah. I was 29 when my partner and I built a cabin in the woods on 5 acres. And That costed me my life savings at the time, but it was $30,000 US, and that was 2006. That I haven't paid rent or mortgage since then, and we've basically lived on the same property since then, right? That was our game changer. And I think people really underestimate affordable, consistent, predictable, safe housing.
And home.
Yeah.
You're talking about home too. You're on land that is home for you. It's become home, huh?
Mm-hmm. It sure has. It sure has. And as Manachi says, grief is the way home when home itself is lost. And yet some of us need a home first before we can then engage
That's right.
in the grief work.
That's right.
And then at some point after that, our authentic rage can then emerge. Our healthy aggression and healthy assertion.
Thank you, Linda.
Thank you, Jen.
This is great. Thank you for joining us for this week's episode of On Trauma and Power. If this conversation resonated with you, or you want to hear more, we'd love for you to subscribe, share, or leave a review. Your support helps these stories reach more people. For more information about today's guest, visit healwithcfte.org/podcast. Follow us on Instagram at On Trauma and Power to stay connected and continue the conversation. To learn more about all that we have to offer here at the Center for Trauma and Embodiment, including training and education for mental health, movement practitioners, and community leaders interested in innovative body-based interventions, head to healwithcfte.org. Thank you for being a part of this exploration with me. Until next time, take care.